base. So hi Martin, it's lovely to see you again, and over to you.
Thanks, Phil. I trust you can see my slides and everyone can hear me. It's great to see where everybody's coming from. You said it's skillful to get it done in 10 minutes. I'm just going to try going fast in the absence of skill. So the reason I called it, but this isn't how we do history, is because in my role as the AI and Innovation in Education lead at King's College London, one of the things that I'm very keen to do is to try and enable staff and students to get up to speed in terms of AI literacy. And that's what this whole event is about. And I was presenting an event to the history department, and we had a guest speaker from Nottingham, Thea Summershield, who's named on the image you can see on the screen there, talking about Ithaca, which is a machine learning project to enable classical historians who are trying to interpret inscriptions in Greek better understand what missing chunks of inscription might be. And they've got some trained on 175,000 artifacts, some incredibly impressive data in their project working with Google DeepMind. And whilst she was presenting, one of the historians in the room said, "This is great and everything, but that's not how we do history." And it really struck me as a kind of powerful message of not so much resistance, but about how novel and new and difficult and how challenging the whole AI piece is to everybody. And that phrase really, really stuck out. And what I realized while I was there and subsequently is that we have a real range: enthusiasm, pragmatism, resistance, compliance, reluctant compliance, enthusiastic compliance. All of these things manifest. And what I want to talk to you a little bit about is how we're addressing that, the kind of journey we've been on in a very short space of time. So just to kick things off, oh, by the way, I should have said that you can access these slides either by the link that I've just bunged in the chat or by just jotting down tiny.cc/DEEW1. And I'll share that link again at the end, because I've got links in here to a bunch of things that I want to share, and then you can have them all for forevermore after the event. So what are the tensions and complexities? Well, first and foremost, I think that the pace of innovation, the pace of change, the rapidity with which these technologies are disrupting everything that we do, not just in education, but in the wider sphere, the wider world, and the pace at which we can change in education, but in higher education in particular. These two things do not align. Anybody who works in higher education, particularly in strategy, or anyone who's ever tried to get a new module proposal form through, will know that it's really difficult, particularly in the UK context where I am, to effect change. But how do you manage that when the AI transformation agenda, the hype, and all of the technology and tools is running away with things? And the other, or the second big tension, is between the potentials that a lot of people are realizing and seeing. In my own area, I'm really trying to advocate for the use of these technologies to support students with disabilities or are neurodivergent, but then versus some of the other goals, particularly in the realm of sustainability. You know, we have a net zero goal. Well, we're using technologies now and potentially promoting the use of technologies that really challenge things in terms of carbon emissions, the training of data, the use of energy, the water for cooling, all of these things, most of you, I'm sure, will be familiar with. The other thing that we're finding quite a lot at King's is that we've got approved tools. We've got Copilot. Everybody use Copilot. It's guardrailed. It's great. It's protected. Does anybody use Copilot? Very few, actually, because they're going to the tools that are familiar, or they're able to do the jobs that they're increasingly finding as an effective use case. And then from my point of view, at the center of the institution, I want to give as much as I can in terms of a consistent central policy and guidance, but actually understanding and recognizing that at a local level, there is a necessity for nuance. We're a 9-faculty institution. You can't do the same thing for medicine that you're doing for business or for law. And then the other thing, and I think this has become really apparent, there was a survey published recently by the Higher Education Policy Institute in February this year that showed the extent of student use of AI technologies, particularly generative AI, and it's huge, and it's roughly outstripping academic staff use as well. So there's an imbalance there in terms of those things. So what was our response? Well, unlike other institutions, we didn't ever try to ban it at a central level, but many institutions did. In fact, some countries did. A lot of institutions have gone down the detection route as a sort of primary response. But again, at King's, we made a decision informed by the research into the likelihood of false positives that detection wasn't a viable option at this stage. Can you control it? Can you manage it? Well, in part, maybe. What does that leave you with? Well, supporting people to better understand so they're not making daft decisions and adapt to the new potentials and possibilities from as informed position as possible. Because just because Microsoft or OpenAI say, use this thing, it's great, doesn't mean that we need to leap in feet first and abide by that. But what we also have a responsibility to is our students and the realities of the way that the work is changing. The World Economic Forum report recently really showed that. So what did we do? Well, we produced guidance. You can follow the link there if you want. We put out a short course. You can see that here. It's free to access for anybody. All of the content is free for 3 weeks from the day you enroll, unless you're at King's or another FutureLearn campus institution, in which case you can sign up for forever. The only thing you pay for if you want it is the certificate, as long as you do it within those 3 weeks. And as you can see, we've got 13,500 people enrolled on that already, and it's really popular. And the discussions, you can see here, 915 discussions on the introduction page, are really valuable and welcome. So that's been a central plank. How do we develop AI literacy? Asynchronously, through things like that, through working groups, through workshops, through local workshops, central workshops, which actually aren't as well attended as we might like. We're trying to distinguish between the teaching with and assessing with AI and the teaching about AI. What in your curricula needs to change in terms of the content to reflect the realities of the world. We've got informal working groups, info hubs, all of that kind of stuff. We've got a 2-word strategy broadly that I say to people, and that is engage responsibly. A lot of people use the word embrace. I prefer to use engage because it's less loving, less accepting, perhaps a little bit more challenging, but the responsible thing is a key component. If you want to find out more about the King's approach, you can follow that link there, and in multiple languages, ask my AI avatar for more information about the King's approach, as that's what I've grounded that in. And again, that's an illustration of some of the sort of experimentation that's happening in that space. What else are we doing? Well, this year we're trying to curate good use cases, support the development of experimentation, of research. We are working with simulation, off the peg, bespoke, expensive technologies, and locally developed simulation tools using customized GPTs. We're supporting people in experiments using RAG, so retrieval augmented generation, and other customizations of large language models and small local language models for evaluation and marking and more controversial stuff like that. We're working on feedback augmentation, student support bots, so pastoral as well as academic bots, and a whole bunch of other things are going on in that space. And these are some of the kind of responses that we're getting. On the bottom here, you can see that we've got this sort of continuum. I expect many of you will be familiar with this, from the really enthusiastic, the fire emoji at the end there, all the way through to the active resistors, the frosty emoji at the other end. And if we think about these extremes, extreme heat and extreme cold, both of them have dangers. Both of them are problematic. I'm trying to take a pragmatic line and acknowledge and accept and engage with those who are reluctant for very many legitimate reasons, who are skeptical for very many legitimate reasons, even resisting for very many legitimate reasons. And those perhaps who are running away with things perhaps need reining in a little bit, but finding a way to navigate that is important. And these on the screen here are some of the reasons why these complicated and mixed responses are happening, and why those arrows is there as well, because people can move up and down the continuum depending on context. their thoughts on AI for research might differ from their thoughts on AI for teaching. So risk aversion, autonomy in faculties, different levels of engagement, workload, time, precarity, all of these things are important complications and considerations. So how are we adjusting things as we're moving forward to respect that emerging picture? Well, I think the key thing that we're doing at King's is trying to have program level interventions. Students experience programs. We want consistency at a program level in the kind of messaging about what they can do, can't do, permitted to do, are encouraged to do, all of those kinds of things. Moving beyond playgrounds and siloed experimentation, ensuring that that engagement imperative is visible, and making sure that we're aligning with the other aspects and components of the complex educational strategies with coherence across the various stakeholder groups. And that's the hardest thing, I think. You know, we've got research interests, professional services interests, student interest, teaching academics interests, and all of these things overlap and ebb and flow and in and out, and it's a complex picture. One example here is, and if you follow the link, it will take you to an article I wrote on teachers growing grade lists, where I've equated AI with assessment innovation as well as artificial intelligence. And these are some of the things that I think are important for us to at least consider, because the arguments are not just about AI in the assessment redesign space. They're about longer term established issues in higher education in particular, about the effectiveness and validity and authenticity of assessment. And for me, this is a real opportunity to leverage wider discussions, to inform people about AI, to raise their literacy in that space, but also grab the opportunity to increase assessment literacy, feedback literacy, pedagogic literacy, and all of that kind of stuff. A couple of other links that I would recommend to you here. I've written with Claire Gordon at LSC and collaborated with colleagues at both institutions on a manifesto for the essay in the age of AI, and that's one of the other the channels that we're feeding all of this through. But I think that's probably enough from me. I've probably just gone over my 10 minutes, so I'm going to stop talking right now.
Thank you so much, Martin. What a great start, as always. Thank you so much. So we do have 2 questions in the Q&A, and we've got about 3 minutes. So let's see how we get on. So the first question came in from Carol, and she said, great support for innovation. Does this include financial support?
Yes, to an extent. So people are able to apply for the cost of licenses, either for themselves, for pro accounts on things like ChatGPT or Claude. We've bought 400 licenses in our science and engineering faculty for Mistral, Le Chat. So in terms of funding for licenses, there's an application process there as well. In terms of research, we allocated 120,000 in 23-24 to generative AI projects, and many of the projects that are being funded this year, so small scale, small fund, small pot research from within the institution, are aligned to the other branches of the education strategy, but many of them are focused on AI as well. So yes, broadly.
Great, thank you. And we have one other question in the Q&A. So I'm probably posting this before you get to the slide, but do you use any sort of framework for AI use in assessments? And if so, how has this been assessed, managed, and evaluated?
Okay, so I mean, in terms of the framework, I think what's more important is well-established assessment frameworks and those kinds of things. But if you're talking about things like traffic light systems and the scales that are coming out in various shapes and forms, on our guidance, you can see the 4 levels of recommended use, which is a sort of starting point. It's a sort of template, really. But what I said earlier about nuancing to local levels, I think is really, really important here. Traffic lights and those kinds of things, I think, have been a really important aspect of navigating this liminal space that we're in. But as things mature and understandings mature and people realize the complexity of this landscape, very often it's really hard to categorize things and put them into those boxes and nuance that. And then you get tied up in, well, does that count as planning? Does that count as, inappropriate levels of support? I think it's about a much, much more sophisticated picture. So I think There are emergent frameworks. We have our own. It's a four degree system, but it's quite simplistic, necessarily so, because it's central. We're 9 faculties. Beyond that, I'm encouraging people to think about what's good assessment. What's a framework for good assessment?
Yeah, yeah.
What is it you're trying to achieve? What do you want your students to know? How do you want your students to behave? What do you want your students to be able to do? The know, be, do is a really important part of that as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Martin. I'd love to keep chatting to you, but we're going to need to move on. Thank you to those of you that put the questions in. 2 great questions to get us started, and please continue to use the Q&A throughout the webinar today. It's super useful. So thank you.